This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your online business. Hello and welcome to my art channel. I am Cosmic Spectrum Art and I'm here to show my face to you guys once in a while so you know who you're dealing with. But anyways, yeah, the reason why I wanted to include the snippet of me just talking to the camera is because, as I have previously mentioned in some of my videos, I've been planning to start a Patreon for my comic project for a very long time now, and I finally have put it together, and I just wanted to let you guys know that it's up and running, and there's a Discord channel that is attached to it as well, and we're building a little community there where I have been posting some behind the scenes snippets of stuff that I'm currently working on in relation to Gloaming Veil, which is my comic project's name. And I just wanted to also ask you guys to consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this project come to life. One of the reasons why it has been taking so long for me to get it off the ground is because a lot of the time I just focus on other work like freelance and whatnot in order to pay the bills and just continue to make a living, but I want to pivot more and more towards working on this comic project. And so for that reason, the Patreon is there to help get it off the ground for me as well, so I can just put more time towards working on it. And that's pretty much it for the face-to-face portion of this video, and for the rest of it I will show you guys the process of this Valentine's Day themed drawing I did recently. Sorry about the super abrupt video cutoff. I was gonna use a different footage for this video originally, but decided to go with this one instead because it's more appropriate for this week's theme, I guess. But anyway, speaking of theme, I'm sure some of you guys have noticed that I have pink hair, which is pretty crazy for me actually. Very crazy, but it's actually not a color that I intended. I've been doing blonde for like as long as I can remember, but this time I wanted to do something a little more red, like orange. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but a more like a natural redhead type of situation, kind of like Noelle actually. But anyways, I think I totally failed to explain this to the girl at the salon, so unfortunately here's what we have, but it's not so bad. I digress talking about my hair. So there's a bunch of stuff that I wanted to talk to you guys about in this video, and the first of those topics is the Patreon and Discord, of course. And I just wanted to let you know that it has helped me so much with getting things going a lot faster than ever before. And honestly, I can't believe that I didn't realize earlier that it's the most logical first step to start the Patreon / Discord, because before I always thought that I need to just collect like a big backlog of content and have a lot of sketches ready to post just so I have things to share and like I don't feel like I'm falling behind or something like that. But it didn't occur to me that because there's so much motivation with the community aspect of it, that it's actually a lot easier for me to focus and just work a lot quicker and be more decisive with what I'm doing instead of trying to hoard things in advance and ahead of time. But yeah, I've actually drawn a lot of new things, like way more than I anticipated in just like a couple of weeks, and I haven't even posted any of them yet. And I believe like this is the first drawing that I did behind the scenes for the Patreon / Discord channel that I'm posting here out in the open. And yeah, it's really nice to have a bunch of backlog of footage now. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff to come. I want to thank you guys that have already become patrons so much. It's helping me a lot, and I really do feel like I'm in a fantastic place with the project, and it is gonna start very soon. So speaking of starting soon, one of the things that I've been getting some input on and just thinking about in general is how I'm going to approach the comic, as in the art direction and what kind of finishing or stylistic approach I'm going to use for it. And one of the things that I was considering is actually using this manga sort of look with the screen tones and going black and white. So this is not something I have ever considered before, actually, and the only reason why it came to my mind is because there are some other artists that I follow, and one of them has been working on a comic project with a friend for a long time, and I'm really excited for them to finally start the comic. And I saw that they decided to keep the comic black and white, very simple, just line work and maybe with some screen tone usage, and in order to make it manageable. And I suddenly thought to myself that, wow, I never even considered this option, and maybe that would actually be a good way to go, because the comic that I'm writing is so long. It's more like a series, and I know that it's gonna span multiple books for sure. So I was thinking that perhaps if I were to kind of prioritize the posting schedule and make sure that the story is being told, you know, in a reasonable time frame, maybe I should consider cutting some of the workload in order to make the production faster. And on that thought, I mean, this thought also kind of occurred to me simultaneously. I was doing another illustration for a book plate. It's actually a different video that I'm going to make, but anyways, in that illustration I tried out the black and white approach with the clean black lines and screen tones, which I did in Clip Studio Paint, and I did really like how the result looked, so I kept thinking about this as an option. But I will say that after doing this illustration that you're looking at right now, I've basically changed my mind and went back on what I was gonna do. Like, went back to my previous plan of making the comic full color, or at least maybe monochromatic, or something that's closer to full color, sort of like the Grimoire Noir approach that I did. For those of you that don't know, Grimoire Noir is a comic / graphic novel project that I did a few years ago that is out and published in the wild. So if you want to look it up, it's Grimoire Noir. Anyways, yeah, so let me tell you about the process of this drawing. So there's a few things that I wanted to tell you about that were kind of like new discoveries to me personally. So before I get to that, let me just tell you about this video sponsor, Squarespace. As an independent artist, I have to juggle a lot of different things all the time, and a portfolio website upkeep isn't something I can spend a whole lot of time on, which is why I really like using Squarespace for this purpose. Once the initial setup is done, maintenance is very quick. Every time I have something to add to my portfolio, uploading the image and rearranging the gallery to look good only takes a minute. I'm also easily able to add to the navigation system when I have something new, like my Patreon page. Squarespace has multiple modes of editing pages as well, which makes it super easy and way more versatile to edit your website, so you can just add a block of text or an image and move things around organically without any need to know custom codes. To start building your own website, you can head over to squarespace.com and get right to it for free. Once you put the website together and are ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/cosmicspectrumart to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Thank you so much, Squarespace. And now let's get back to the video. Okay, so the first thing that I noticed that I just wanted to quickly talk about before I move on to other topics is the importance of resolution of the file in digital art. So this is kind of like a broad topic, I suppose, because it really depends on what you're working on, what the end goal of your illustrations are. But let me just quickly try to summarize the reason why I noticed this is actually so important and detrimental. So, you know how earlier I mentioned that I was working on a different illustration recently where I also used the screen tone black and white approach? So when I was working on that illustration, it had a set resolution / file size, so it just needed to be 4:6, I believe, or something along those lines, 4:6 inches, and it was for printing, so it had to be 300 dpi, and that's the file size that I made. It's possible that I made it slightly bigger for the sake of details, but anyways, I digress. Let's just say I made it the size that it was supposed to be. Okay, so I worked on that and it was no problem. I did it pretty quickly and I liked the result, etc. So the reason why I bring that up is because for this particular drawing, I also wanted to go a similar size, but for whatever reason, because I was just working on it for no specific plan of what I was going to do with the illustration, I decided that maybe I should just make it a lot bigger, just in case I wanted to print something bigger or use it for some other reason. Who knows, right? And the reason why I thought about it this way is because I do prefer working on larger resolution file sizes ever since I got the 24 Pro CINTIQ screen, which is in 4K resolution, so you can't really see individual pixels at this size and everything is very clear, and that makes resolution very tricky. Like, it really changed the way I perceive canvas size when I switched over to the 4K screen resolution, because when I had a regular HD screen, after zooming in like past 100% of the canvas size, things got noticeably blurrier, and the size at which you see the illustration at 100% was actually different than what it is on this bigger screen. So if you zoom in at 100% on an illustration that's like a typical size, I guess, it's actually relatively small on this large screen, and since I don't want to like squint and like work super tiny, I need to make it bigger. And because I have this habit of trying not to zoom in past 100% on any illustration, that just kind of forces me out of habit to make the resolution a lot bigger, so that at 100% when I zoom in all the way on the drawing, it's large and everything is super clear and there's no blurriness or anything like that. So this is where it gets really annoying, and this is something that I was like loosely aware of before but became way more evident to me now, is that the size of the canvas really affects the brushes, especially when they have a texture. So I am a big fan of using textured brushes in Photoshop, and I use a bunch of different ones and they all have a texture attached. So when the size of the drawing, or sorry, of the canvas is gigantic, the way that I make it so that it's super crisp and huge at 100% resolution, the brush's texture looks way smaller than it does on smaller sized canvases. And also, another thing that happens with me is when I start inking it, I kind of lose track of the size of the illustration, I guess, and I start zooming in way more than I normally would. And this sometimes like borderline triples the amount of time that it takes for me to finish an illustration. It's actually kind of crazy, and the only reason I noticed this so clearly now is because the illustration that I was working on right before this one was on a much smaller canvas, and just doing it back to back made me truly notice the difference. Because back in the day, like I do digital art relatively frequently, especially if it's like a phase that I'm going through, kind of like right now. And sometimes I would be doing an illustration and I would get so frustrated because seemingly the line art aspect portion of it would take me much longer than other things that I've worked on before. But for the life of me, like, I couldn't put my finger on why. Like, I couldn't understand why suddenly doing the line work is taking so much longer. And okay, I think I have cracked code, you guys. I don't know if this is super stupid for some of you to hear, but I don't know, like, as someone who's been doing digital art for so many years, this stuff wasn't, it wasn't super obvious to me. It's not something that I don't know, like, I kind of had an idea, but I can't say that I never realized just how much of a difference it actually made, So I think going forward, I will pay way more attention to
the canvas size of the illustration that I'm making and avoid blowing them up, because there's really no reason for me to double or triple the size of an illustration, especially when I have a rough idea of what the printing size will be. Like, you never need to go beyond the printing size at 300 dpi resolution. So like, if you want to make a postcard that's 4x6, a file that's 4x6 inches at 300 dpi resolution is all you need, and you really don't need to go any bigger than that. And so I am finally making a decision to stop doubling the canvas size for apparently no reason at all, because it's really not even that bad. Using a 4K screen, even if you zoom in past 100, it's still okay. But, and you know, once things get super blurry or like get really pixelated, that's how you know you just should stop zooming in at that point. And it's a good indicator, because yeah, like I said, with these way larger file sizes, I can't even tell, like, even if I zoom in past 100, sometimes it's still relatively clear and the whole thing just gets completely confusing. Like, one of the ways to combat this brush situation with the texture, like, brushes just look differently. They appear differently. They don't feel the same. It's kind of like very strange sometimes when you expect the brush to just behave the same, especially when you're very used to using it on one canvas size, and suddenly you can't even tell what the difference is, but it's just different. I don't know about you guys, but stuff like that drives me nuts. And yeah, I realized that the canvas size is the culprit here. And usually, if you really can't change the canvas size, and if it has to be very large, you can actually go and adjust the size of the texture grain within the brush settings. But you know, it's kind of annoying. And I suppose the one way around this, to make things easier, is to take the time and make brushes, like save them out in different sizes in accordance to the canvas size that you're using. I think some people do that, but I mean, it's way too much work for me, and I think I'm gonna try to stick to similar sized canvases from now on. So yeah, that took a while to explain, but I hope it made sense to you guys. And yeah, just to quickly talk about this illustration, I followed my pretty basic approach with doing one rough sketch and then doing a cleaner sketch over top of it, and then moving on to line work and the rest on top of that. It's that's my typical go-to approach. I like to clean up a sketch twice, or like I like to make two sketches before moving on to the line work, because it just really saves time that way. And yeah, for the screen tone portion of this drawing, I did switch over to Clip Studio Paint. And actually, I'm not going to talk much about the screen toning operation that I've got going on over here, because I do have that previous illustration that I mentioned that I did before this one, where I also use screen tones, and I want to take my time to specifically talk about that in the other illustration, where I can make it a little bit more instructional about using Clip Studio Paint screen tone option that they have in the program. But anyways, yeah, one thing that's so funny is that while I was working on this, I could not even remember how to properly do clipping masks. Sometimes I really get, like, I wish Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint were the same program, because I keep going back to Photoshop. I'm so used to it. All my favorite brushes are there. I'm used to the way things are situated and just to the interface. And then I'll switch to Clip Studio once in a while for some specific purpose, and then I'll have to relearn it all over again. And hilariously enough, I actually went back and watched my own Clip Studio Paint video to get a refresher on how to use the clipping masks and whatnot. So yeah, I thought that was really funny. Anyways, yeah, so what else did I want to talk about here? So yeah, I'll just circle back and talk about the approach that I'm planning to use for my comic, which is probably not going to be this screen tone approach. And the reason why I'm coming to that conclusion is because, honestly, after working on this illustration, I can't really say that it saves a whole bunch of time. And I am one of those people, like, I can't keep things super simple. I just can't. And I want to add some highlights and add some more shading. And in the end, I think if I were to find a look that I'm really happy with the screen tone approach, the time that it would take to do that will basically rival the time that it would take to just go ahead and make it full color. So I think I will probably go with full color. So yeah, back on that, I'll probably talk about that again soon, because I am planning to start doing test pages like immediately, hopefully next week if everything pans out. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to talk about is this last little bit of chaos you see on the screen is me trying all these different things. I really wasn't sure how I wanted to finish this drawing because I wanted it to be sort of Valentine's Day themed, so I figured I wanted the colors to be warm, at least like reddish or like pink or something. And then the background looked super empty, so I tried out a bunch of different things and I settled on using this watercolor texture. I didn't make this texture myself. I believe I just purchased it from the creative market at some point. Time saver. But yeah, I thought the texture looks pretty nice, but I just couldn't really settle on a color that I liked, and I just kept experimenting with layer styles and overlays ad nauseum, and eventually I just gave up because I didn't really know what else I could do with this drawing. I suppose if I look at it, it almost looks like a panel test, probably because I had panels on my mind and like the comic approach in my mind. Overall, I really love the way the line art turned out in this drawing, but like I mentioned, the whole thing with the canvas size being too big, it took too long because the lines are too thin. But otherwise, there you go. There's a little Valentine's Day hostility themed drawing. I do tend to get very exhausted by experimentation, and that's one of the reasons why I am a little bit nervous about doing the test pages, but it's the type of work that definitely needs to be done ahead of time so that I can just settle on a conclusive approach before I start the real execution.
Thanks so much for watching this video if you have made it to the end. And I am, again, super grateful for everybody who has already become a patron over at my Patreon. Sounds so funny. Anyways, yeah, and I'm super excited to continue to work on my comic and finally get it started. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!